President Moon also managed to find time for bilateral meetings with leaders of Brunei and Laos, calling for greater economic cooperation and support for his push for peace. At the center of the attention, though, is still President Moon's sideline diplomacy with Russian President Vladimir Putin, the fourth such meeting between the two, as their discussions could include talks of Russian Far East development cooperation, seen as pivotal in denuclearizing the divided Korean peninsula. Shin Se-min, Arirang News, Singapore.
A high-level meeting set for last week between North Korea and the U.S. was canceled, but the State Department says it's looking forward to rescheduling. Spokesperson Heather Nauert said Tuesday that the meeting is important to Washington and that they are in regular communication with the North. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo was supposed to meet last Thursday in New York with Kimjang, the vice chairman of North Korea's ruling Workers' Party's Central Committee. The two were going to be discussing North Korea's denuclearization and the next Kim Jong-un-Donald Trump summit. But the talks were postponed just the day before, supposedly because North Korea asked for more time to prepare. A high-level delegation from Pyongyang will be in the south starting today for a 4-day visit. 7 members of the North Korea Asia-Pacific Peace Committee, who are coming primarily to attend an international conference on Friday. The conference is hosted by a South Korean organization and the province of Gyeonggi-do. Participants from the two Koreas and Japan will be discussing Japan's forced mobilization of Koreans back when it ruled Korea as a colonizer. The presence of the North Koreans is getting attention because they include 2 senior officials who've been involved in negotiations with the U.S. and with South Korea. Some think they could end up meeting with the South Korean administration, though the Unification Ministry says there are no such plans as of now because their visit is of a non-governmental nature. The South Korean government has been working to breathe life into the job market. It's devoted almost $3.5 billion in extra taxpayer money to job creation programs. But the latest monthly report shows the situation for job seekers is still pretty rough. Ko Ryun-hee reports.
More disappointing figures on the employment front in South Korea, despite the government's efforts to increase the number of jobs. According to Statistics Korea on Wednesday, the overall unemployment rate was 3.5% in October, up 0.3 percentage points from the same period last year. Just comparing the month of October, it's the highest figure since 2005. There was a slight glint of light, such as the number of newly added jobs. The number of employed people was up 64,000 on-year in October to reach almost 27.1 million. This is a slight increase considering the disappointing figures recorded during the previous month. In September, the number of newly added jobs reached 45,000, after remaining below the 10,000 mark in July and August. The agency said the overall situation is looking grim.
Although the number of people employed in the health activities sectors is increasing, the number of people employed in wholesale and retail and business facilities management is continuously decreasing. Also, the overall employment rate has been going down on year since February. The current employment situation is serious.
The South Korean government unveiled new measures to boost job creation in late October. It includes plans to create 59,000 jobs for youth, people in their 50s and 60s, and the elderly, mainly in central government, public institutions, and local governments. Statistics Korea says the effect of this plan will be reflected in November's data. Ko Ryun-hee, Arirang News.
Just 1 day left now until Korea's annual college entrance exam, a test that'll have a huge impact on the future of the young people taking it. Almost 600,000 students, mostly high school seniors, will take the test at nearly 1,200 venues nationwide. It'll start at 8:40 in the morning, and to make sure students don't have problems getting to the test sites, trains and buses will run more frequently, and many commuters will start work an hour later than usual. The financial markets will also open and close an hour later. During the exam, traffic will be controlled around the test sites, and planes won't take off or land for about 30 minutes during the English listening part. The Education Ministry says it's inspected the facilities and will have extra vehicles on hand to take the students to or from the test sites in case of a natural disaster. The K-pop boy band BTS gave a concert Tuesday in Japan for their hit record, Love Yourself. They're first in the country for that album. Despite a recent controversy involving the group, the Tokyo Dome was sold out. Our Kimjang has this report.
On Tuesday, thousands of fans lined up at the 55,000-seater Tokyo Dome to see the South Korean boy band BTS in concert. Despite anger over the band's previous wardrobe choices and stage props interpreted as commemorating the atomic bombing of Japan and the Nazis, which led to the cancellation of BTS' appearance on Japanese TV, fans gathered to show their support for the group.
I don't think it was his intention to wear that t-shirt with the atom bomb. I believe that they didn't do it because they hate Japan.
One right-wing protester showed up to denounce the ban on a speaker but received little attention, and no large-scale anti-Korean protests were seen. During the performance, vocalist Jae-in, who stands at the heart of the controversy for wearing a t-shirt that showed the atomic bombing of Japan, is said to have vaguely addressed the situation. He thanked the fans for coming to the concert. The boy band's latest release topped Japan's Oricon Weekly Singles Chart last week. BTS has more shows lined up in Japan, with a concert in Osaka later this month and shows in Nagoya and Fukuoka in January and February 2019, respectively. The shows are already sold out. Kimjang, Arirang News.
I'm Devin Whiting, and those are your news headlines.
U.S. President Donald Trump says he was not surprised by reports on North Korea's secretive missile bases, insisting his administration was well aware of the findings and there was nothing new to do. His top security advisor also echoed those remarks, adding that the U.S. was ready for a second summit with North Korea. Kim Yo-sun tells us more.
President Trump's response was short and to the point. He said there is nothing new in the report published this week by the Washington-based think tank, the Center for Strategic and International Studies. He took to Twitter to say he's fully aware of the missile base that is referred to in the report, stressing nothing out of the ordinary is happening. Trump also criticized a New York Times article which cited the report as fake news, as it spread incorrect information. U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton also confirmed there was nothing new in the CSIS report. He also said President Trump is ready for a second summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Such a swift response shows Washington's willingness to show Pyongyang that its stance is unchanged and it's still open to denuclearization talks. There has been criticism of the way the CSIS report was portrayed in the media, especially by the New York Times, that called the findings, quote, great deception by the North. The report is also based on satellite images taken in March, which was 3 months before the first ever summit between the leaders of North Korea and the U.S. Kim Yo-sun, Arirang News.
And joining us today is Dr. Ko Myung-hyun from the Asan Institute for Policy Studies. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So it was a day of alarm yesterday after reports that the U.S. think tank has identified 13 undeclared missile bases in North Korea, with some media outlets claiming that Washington had been fooled by Pyongyang. Now, President Donald Trump has tweeted and playing down these concerns, saying that nothing's new, they are all aware of this information, nothing abnormal is happening. How do you see the situation?
Well, I think, to an extent, President Trump is correct in the sense that this is not a brand new discovery. But then I think the important finding this time by the CSIS is that North Korea has been continuing which build-up of the WMD capabilities, in this case, the missile program. So I think it's a reminder again to the rest of the world that the situation in the Korean Peninsula, it's not full denuclearization, it's actually just freeze. So in that sense, that's the essence of the report. But then what's interesting about this cycle, the media cycle, is that this reminds me of what happened back in October when in the aftermath of the cancellation of the third visit by Secretary Pompeo to Pyongyang. And then there was a little bit of speculation that there could be a tension coming back to the Korean Peninsula. I think President Trump stamped down such speculation by declaring in public that he was in love with Kim Jong-un. So I see something similar here. There's been an impasse in terms of a negotiation between the two countries. So I think there's a growing voice, especially in Washington, about skepticism about the ultimate prospect of North Korea denuclearizing. And I think this news article by the New York Times is another example of such skepticism in prevailing in Washington. And I think President Trump took the action of stepping down speculation about the ultimate status of the negotiation between the two countries. I think he did a good job.
Now, speculation still lingers that this latest report could worsen the prospects for resuming the denuclearization talks between North Korea and the United States. But Trump's latest tweet has moved the roadblock to the side, for now at least. Do you think he's trying to suggest that the talks are back on track or are still on track?
It's still on track. That's definitely his message here. He actually contradicted an article by the New York Times and also contradicted a report by a very important, influential Washington think tank, which oftentimes assumes a very skeptical approach towards North Korea. So it's clearly signaling to Pyongyang that the talks are still viable. But I think it's also important to notice that every time there's this kind of speculation and this speculation dominates the media cycle, President Trump becomes the ultimate decider, so to speak. When he makes the final say, whether this is okay or not okay, we see that the media cycle totally switching the direction. So I think it's actually putting spotlight of, actually putting himself on the spotlight and also signaling to Pyongyang that ultimately he's going to make or break the deal. So North Korea should better come out with a good offer so that in order to convince him.
So aside from the high-level talks that were postponed last week, U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton said that President Trump is ready for a second summit with North Korean leader Kimjang, but didn't give any details so far on the time or location. Now, given that his remark comes a day after these reports, would you say it has any relevance to that, or it's just a matter of coincidence?
So it's actually another incentive to offer to Pyongyang that in a way, it's a gentle reminder to North Korea that right now there's no progress being made on the denuclearization talk, and it's really up to North Korea to come up with a convincing offer of taking concrete steps towards denuclearization. In this case, coming up with a full disclosure of the North Korea's nuclear assets and infrastructure and weapons. So we are not seeing any progress being made on that front. And so President Trump doesn't really want to be the bad guy here. I think there are plenty of people in Washington who want to be the bad guy and pressure North Korea, very strong messages. So I think, President Trump is sending a signal through John Bolton, that National Security Advisor John Bolton, that he's willing to meet Kim Jong-un and then sign off the deal if North Korea comes out with a good offer.
Now, you did touch upon it, but however, looking at this issue from the other hand, the reports could actually signal that there is skepticism within the U.S. towards North Korea's and its denuclearization. It seems that the U.S. Department is also aware of this. In a briefing, the spokesperson said that the administration sees progress in their relationship with North Korea, but some people like to poo-poo the idea. What's the general view in regards to this within the U.S.?
Well, the majority view in Washington right now is one of skepticism. And I think we cannot really blame what's going on, the view that most of the foreign policy and national security establishments have towards North Korea, because we have many, many years of North Korea not delivering on its promises. There's one. So Washington has a long memory in that regard. And second is that I think there's a little bit of a window opportunity for North Korea to convince that North Korea materially changed from the past. I say that window opportunity was probably the time that after the Singapore summit back in June. I think there's some expectation that North Korea could deliver a major offer to Washington and convince everybody that North Korea is indeed is actually committed to denuclearization. I think that window is closing because there's no actual progress being made. And I think that's the reason why the voice of skepticism in Washington is getting stronger and stronger.
So yes, North Korea does in fact have a track record of not keeping the promises. So there are voices within the U.S. calling for more concrete developments or a solid outcome when it comes to the U.S. dealing with North Korea. Should these views become more prevalent, and given that the Democrats have a grip of the House now, do you see like a shift coming in Washington's North Korea policy down the road?
I think we are definitely lurching rightward in terms of expectation on the delivering a workable deal with North Korea, especially with the Democrats dominating the House in the Congress. It will be difficult for Trump administration to come up with a quote-unquote a shoddy deal with North Korea. I think President Trump is now under pressure to deliver actually a materially significant denuclearization deal. So, and the one benchmark for that will be the JCPOA, the deal that President Obama reached with Iran regarding Iran's denuclearization. And that JCPOA deal actually has a lot of details and very specific roadmap about what Iran should do and what the counterparts in the international community should do. So that's the level of detail that I think the U.S. Congress will be asking the U.S. administration to deliver if he wants to reach a deal with North Korea.
Shifting our gears a little, President Moon Jae-in has begun his schedule in Singapore now. During his visit to Europe last month, he drummed up support for his peace drive with North Korea and also highlighted the need to ease sanctions on Pyongyang. What sort of message do you think he's trying to relay this time?
I think President Moon will be consistent in his messaging that the peace has finally arrived, but at least there's some chance for a lasting peace in the Korean Peninsula, and that two Koreas need support from the international community. And I think I hear about better reception this time in ASEAN than in Europe. As a matter of fact, there are many ASEAN countries that have, I want to have larger, more extended, expansive economic engagement with North Korea, and sanctions are clearly it's a roadblock for them to reach that goal. So I think my expectation is that if President Moon sends the same message that he sent in Europe to ASEAN countries, he'll get a better reception.
So President Moon has also squeezed in a number of bilateral meetings in between of his ASEAN and APEC summits. A meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin should be happening shortly. Both sides have recognized the need for easing sanctions on progress towards denuclearization. Do you think issues like these will be on the table for discussion today?
I don't think they're going to talk very specifically about easing sanctions. We have to understand that our most important ally, the United States' position towards North Korea, is one of keeping the sanctions in place until North Korea commits to denuclearization. I don't think President Moon is going to contradict the U.S. position in this regard in front of a Russian president. So, but I think in general, there will be a consensus between the two countries that there should be dialogue in the Korean Peninsula, and then there should be a reward for North Korea if North Korea takes the right action.
So something to keep our eyes on there. Now, but despite the standoff between North Korea and the U.S., inter-Korean exchanges seem largely undisrupted for now, at least. In accordance to the joint military agreement, the two Koreas have disarmed the joint security area at the border town of border village of Panmunjom. They've also been carrying out joint excavations and removing landmines. How do you assess these developments?
Well, this is it's actually been decided in the three previous inter-Korean summits. Essentially, these are implementation of the measures agreed in the Panmunjom Declaration and the Pyongyang Declaration. So this is a continuing pace, and then also because the sanctions that are in place target the economic side of North Korea rather than the military side. I think that there's a general consensus that building confidence between the two countries and lower the level of distrust and tension is actually overall a good thing. So I think that there will be a continued support for these kind of actions.
But it's not all areas that have seen the developments. The two Koreas have held meetings on connecting their railway and roads, but no specific plans or details have been reached. They said they will hold a groundbreaking ceremony at the end of the year. There's speculation that the slow progress is due to the standoff between North Korea and the U.S. because there has been a divide over sanctions relief. How do you see this?
That's definitely correct. United Nations Sanctions Resolution 2397 actually states that transferring or lending any kind of support to North Korea in the areas of transportation is actually banned. So connecting North Korea and South Korea's railways and road network actually would potentially put South Korea's action in violation of United Nations Security Council resolutions. So this is actually UN sanction, not the US sanction. And I think that's something that the South Korean government is looking carefully into. So there are many potential areas of cooperation that would put South Korea in violation of sanctions. And that's clearly a stumbling block for furthering the inter-Korean engagement. But I think this is actually a legacy of North Korean provocations throughout past 5 years at least. With the nuclear test and the missile test, North Korea was punished accordingly by the international community. So in order for North Korea to convince the international community to ease the sanctions, North Korea will have to take corresponding measures to stand down in terms of provocations and dismantling their nuclear program.
Then would you say that these developments regarding railway or road connections will have to put off until talks between the U.S. and North Korea are resumed?
I think until talks is one thing, but we have to look at the outcome of such talks. And then the expectation is that North Korea will eventually have to commit to a program of denuclearization. I think we have to wait until that moment to see whether we can lift at least some of the sanctions measures.
Turning our attention to China, China also appears to be strictly controlling the flow of capital into North Korea at the moment. Reports say Chinese authorities are restricting their firms from making transactions with Pyongyang. And this is a change in stance between late September and October. And because it comes at a time when there is a trade spat between China and the U.S., could we say Beijing's shift in position is a show of warming up to Washington?
I think we're reading too much into it, and I think there's the level of dialogue, communication between China and the United States much more profound than we think it is. On the surface, we see a lot of confrontation and tension, especially on the trade issues. But then deep down, there's also a very in-depth cooperation when it comes to policy matters. And I think what happened in this case is not so much about China trying to kowtow to Washington by doing a favor by enforcing sanctions that they should be enforcing anyways. I think it's more a matter of possibly of U.S. counterparts, government agencies reminding Chinese counterparts and then Chinese firms of the necessity of implementing sanctions against North Korea. At the same time, I think U.S. agencies probably warned the Chinese counterparts and the Chinese companies of the potential consequences, such as secondary boycott against the entities that violate the sanctions. So there was a very similar message was sent to South Korean companies and banks around the same time. So I think it was a concerted campaign by the U.S. government to remind everybody, not just China or South Korea, that individuals and entities should abide by the sanctions. Otherwise, they could risk the potential secondary boycott by the United States government.
Given the slow progress between the U.S. and North Korea at the moment, a lot of attention is put on President Moon's overseas trip. Could we say that his trip will facilitate the talks again, be able to stimulate the talks as we saw in the past?
I think the momentum that President Moon has created for the progress in the talks between United States and North Korea is actually losing steam, so to speak. The reason is because he has tried it so many times, but then there hasn't been a major breakthrough. There's no issue. Clearly, we essentially reached out for all the easiest pickings, the low-hanging fruit, so to speak. Developments the political side, development the social side, and humanitarian side have all been essentially done. So only important thing that's left are denuclearization measures and the sanctions. So these are actually crucial, critical points that neither side, either North Korea or the United States, want to make a major concession to the other side. So we essentially reached the final stage, so to speak. So it'll be difficult for President Moon, also a third party, to somehow convince the two parties to make progress from the outside the ring, so to speak.
Okay, I'm afraid that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for your insights.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of our show. I'll be back again tomorrow with more on the day's top issues. But in the meantime, stay tuned to Arirang for our later newscast for all the latest updates. Thanks for watching and see you again soon. Goodbye.
(2018) Overseas TV Audience Survey. Arirang TV and Gallup Korea are conducting research on viewer opinions. Your honest answers will be used for the development of Arirang TV. From November 1st to the 24th, you can participate in the survey through our website, www.arirang.com. We will send an autographed CD to randomly chosen respondents as a token of our appreciation. We are waiting for your participation.
One, two, three. Are you okay? No.